The marketplace reeked of desperation and rotting fruit. Autumn had come early to Ironhaven this year, bringing with it an unusual chill that seeped through threadbare cloaks and worn boots. Yet it was not the cold that made Alara pull her shawl tighter around her shoulders. It was something else, something wrong that crawled across her skin and nestled at the base of her skull. Death had come to market today. "Stay close, Lily," Alara murmured to the 10-year-old whose small hand was clasped tightly in hers. Her walking stick tapped against cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of commerce, guiding them through the press of bodies. "Alara, there's a crowd gathering near Victor's platform," Lily whispered, her voice small against the cacophony of haggling. "Everyone's pushing to see." Victor. The name alone sent a ripple of disgust through Alara's stomach. The Ironhaven Council's senior advisor and the territory's wealthiest merchant had fingers in every unsavory pie from here to the eastern valleys. If he was drawing a crowd, nothing good would come of it. "What do you see?" Alara asked, tilting her face slightly. Though blind since birth, her other senses had sharpened to compensate. Now she detected the unmistakable tang of blood beneath the market's usual odors: copper and salt and something else, something ancient and wrong. "There's a man on the platform," Lily reported, standing on tiptoes. "He's huge, Alara, bigger than anyone I've ever seen. And there's blood, so much blood. His shoulder—" Her voice caught. "There's something black spreading from it, like ink under his skin." Alara's heart stuttered. Black poison in the veins. Her mother's stories came flooding back, tales whispered in the dead of night about Shadowbane, a weapon banned after the border war 3 decades ago. A weapon that killed not just the body, but fragmented the soul. "What will you give me for him?" Victor's voice cut through the crowd, false joviality barely masking his contempt. "Prime specimen, this one. Alpha blood runs strong, even if he is from Ravenwood." The crowd erupted in jeers and hissing. Ravenwood, the forbidden territory beyond the Thornwood, where wolves were said to be more beast than man, where magic was practiced openly, an abomination in the eyes of Ironhaven's rigid laws. 30 gold marks, Victor announced. "Fair price for an alpha, even a savage one." Silence. Not a single bid. Alara tilted her head, focusing past the noise to the platform. There, beneath the jeering and Victor's merchant pitch, she heard it. Breathing. Labored, wet, painful. And something else. A sound so low she almost missed it. A rumble that resonated in her chest like distant thunder. The alpha was dying, yet fighting with everything he had. 20 marks, Victor called, frustration creeping into his voice. A rock sailed through the air. Alara heard it whistle past, followed by a dull thud and a sharp intake of breath from the wounded man. "Savage!" someone shouted. More projectiles followed. 10 marks, Victor announced. "Come now, this is robbery." "Stop!" The word tore from Alara's throat before she could think. The marketplace fell silent. She felt hundreds of eyes turned toward her. "Alara, no," Lily breathed. But Alara was already moving forward, her stick tapping against cobblestones as she made her way through the parting crowd. "Well, well," Victor's voice dripped with false warmth. "The blind healer graces us with her presence. Come to observe my wares, Alara?" Scattered laughter rippled through the crowd. Alara's cheeks burned, but she kept her face carefully neutral. She had learned long ago to hide her emotions in a place where being different meant being dangerous. "I'll take him," she said clearly. "For 10 marks." The silence that followed was deafening. "You?" Victor's amusement was evident. "My dear girl, you can barely care for yourself and that foundling you keep. What would you do with a Ravenwood alpha?" "Heal him," Alara said simply. "Isn't that what healers do? You wouldn't be selling him if you could save him yourself." She heard Victor's sharp intake of breath at the challenge. "I have the 10 marks. That's more than anyone else has offered." 10 marks is insulting. "It's what I have." Alara held out her hand, letting the coins clink together, her entire savings, meant for winter supplies. 10 marks or he dies on that platform, and you get nothing but a corpse to bury." The silence stretched. "Please," she added quietly. "He's suffering." Something shifted in the air. The crowd's bloodlust wavered. "Fine," Victor spat. 10 marks. But when he tears your throat out, don't come crying to the council." Alara climbed the platform steps carefully, every board creaking beneath her weight. When she reached the top, she extended her coins. Victor snatched them from her palm. "He's yours. May you find joy in your bargain." The chains rattled as Victor roughly unlocked them. Alara heard the heavy body sway, and she instinctively reached out. Her hand connected with a massive forearm, and the contact sent electricity shooting through her entire body. The Alpha made a sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a whimper. "Easy," Alara murmured. "I won't hurt you." She felt his muscles tense beneath her touch, felt the heat of his fever, and there, just beneath her fingertips, she felt his pulse. Strong despite everything, fighting to stay alive. "Alara," Lily appeared at her side. "Everyone's staring." "Let them," Alara said. She turned to where she sensed the Alpha's face would be. "Can you walk?" He didn't respond, but she felt him shift, leaning heavily on her small frame. His weight was enormous, but he was trying. Together they descended the platform steps. The crowd parted silently before them. As they reached the edge of the marketplace, Alara heard a voice behind them, cold and sharp. "Alara." It was Samuel, one of the territory's patrol leaders, a man whose loyalty to Victor was only exceeded by his disdain for outsiders. "You realize what you've just done?" Alara stopped, but didn't turn. "I bought a wounded man. Is that against Ironhaven law now, Commander?" "That's not just any Alpha," Samuel said, his voice dropping. "That's Magnus, the Ravenwood war leader. He's killed dozens of our kind in the border war." Alara's blood turned to ice. War leader, killer of men. The Alpha, Magnus, swayed dangerously beside her, and she tightened her grip on him. "He's wounded and dying," she said steadily. "Right now, he's just a patient." "He's a killer," Samuel hissed. "Then heal him or execute him properly," Alara shot back. "Don't torture him in the marketplace like entertainment." She felt Samuel's anger radiating like heat. "When he shows his true nature, don't expect help from anyone. You've chosen your side, Alara, and it's the wrong one." The walk to Alara's cottage took nearly an hour. Magnus's weight grew heavier with each step, his breathing more labored. Lily had run ahead to prepare the house. When they finally reached her cottage at the edge of Ironhaven, Lily had the door open and blankets spread on the floor near the hearth. "Help me get him down," Alara said. Together they guided Magnus to the blankets. He collapsed more than sat, his control finally giving out. "Water," Alara instructed Lily, "and bring my healing kit, the large one." As Lily rushed to comply, Alara knelt beside Magnus, one hand still gripping her walking stick while the other reached toward him. Her fingers moved over him carefully, mapping his injuries by touch. His face was unfamiliar to her fingers: strong jaw, rough stubble, high cheekbones marked by tiny scars. His body was solid muscle beneath torn clothing, the heat of fever radiating through the fabric. But it was when her fingers found his shoulder wound that her breath caught. The flesh there was wrong, not just wounded, but corrupted. The skin was hot and cold at the same time, pulsing with something unnatural. "Lily," she said carefully, "describe the wound to me exactly." Lily leaned close. "It's black, Alara. Not like dirt or blood. Black like ink or shadow, and it's spreading. There are veins of it going down his arm and across his chest. They're silver black, and they almost look like they're moving." Alara's hands trembled. Shadowbane poison. The forbidden weapon whispered about in stories. Said to be extinct, impossible to create. Yet here it was, killing a man beneath her hands. "I need willow bark, feverfew, and golden seal," Alara said quickly. "Bring them with the mortar." As Lily scrambled to obey, Alara pressed her hands more firmly against Magnus's wound. The poison pulsed beneath her palms, draining his life force systematically. She could feel it spreading, seeking his heart. Normal healing wouldn't work. This required something more. "Please forgive me," she whispered. She closed her eyes and reached deep within herself to the place where her other gift lived, the one she'd hidden since childhood, the one that had gotten her mother killed. Warmth began in her chest, spreading down her arms and into her palms. It wasn't natural heat. This was different. Silver white, pure, alive. The legacy of her bloodline, the power of the soul healers. The moment her healing power touched the Shadowbane poison, Magnus's entire body convulsed. His back arched off the blankets, and a sound tore from his throat that was pure animal agony. "Elara!" Lily gasped. "His eyes are glowing gold like fire." Elara felt Magnus's hand shoot up and grip her wrist with crushing strength. She cried out, but didn't pull away. The healing had already begun, and breaking contact now would kill them both. The poison fought her. It was alive in its own terrible way, feeding on Magnus's alpha power. But Elara's gift was older than poisons, older than weapons. She poured more power into him, feeling it clash with the Shadowbane. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her arms shook with effort. "Elara," Lily whispered, "you're glowing too. Your hands are silver." The poison began to retreat. Slowly, the black veins started to recede, but the effort was costing Elara everything. Her breathing turned ragged. The room spun even in her darkness. Just a little more, she told herself. Magnus's grip on her wrist suddenly shifted. Instead of crushing, his fingers gentled, and she felt him pull her hand toward his face. His nose pressed against her inner wrist, and she heard him inhale deeply, desperately. Then his lips touched her pulse point, soft as a whisper, and his teeth sank in. Elara's scream caught in her throat, emerging as little more than a strangled gasp. Pain lanced up her arm, sharp and immediate. But worse, or perhaps better, was what followed. Heat flooded through her veins, liquid fire that raced from the bite mark through her entire body. It felt like being consumed and reborn simultaneously. Her healing power surged in response, doubling, tripling in intensity. It poured into Magnus through the connection of his bite, and she felt his life force surge in answer. "No!" she gasped, trying to pull away, but his grip held firm, his teeth still embedded in her wrist. She felt his tongue against her skin, felt him drinking, and with each pull, something inside her rewired itself, changed, became fundamentally different. The Shadowbane poison shrieked, she could actually hear it, and shattered. The black veins vanished like smoke. The corruption burned away by their mingled power. Magnus released her wrist and collapsed back onto the blankets, unconscious. Elara swayed where she knelt, staring down at her arm, though she couldn't see the bite mark. She could feel it, twin points of sharp pain that throbbed in time with her racing heartbeat. The flesh around them was tender and inflamed, as if her body couldn't decide whether to accept or reject the mark. "Elara," Lily's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Elara, you're bleeding." The room tilted. Elara felt her body tip sideways, felt Lily's small hands try to catch her. The last thing she was aware of before darkness took her was the sound of Magnus's breathing. Steady now, no longer labored, and a warmth in her chest that hadn't been there before. A presence, a connection, a bond. Elara woke to whispers. "Shouldn't be possible. No Omega has survived an Alpha's claiming bite in centuries." "She's not just any Omega, Eleanor, you can sense it. And there's something else in her blood. Her mother was the same. That's why they killed her." Elara's eyes opened to the same darkness that always greeted her. But something was different. She could sense presences in her cottage with unusual clarity. Two women, both radiating the unique energy signature of healers, and there, unconscious on her floor, the massive presence of Magnus. But he was no longer dying. His life force burned steady and strong. "She's awake," the older woman said. "Give us a moment, Rena." Footsteps retreated. A door closed. "My name is Eleanor," the older woman said gently. "I'm the elder healer from Ravenwood Territory. Your little Lily ran all the way to our borders while you were unconscious, begging for help. Took her half the night, but she didn't stop once. Brave child." Alara struggled to sit up. "Where's Lily? Is she safe?" "Sleeping in your loft." The journey exhausted her. Eleanor moved closer, and Alara heard the creak of her joints as she knelt. "May I see your wrist?" Alara hesitated, then extended her arm. Eleanor's fingers were gentle as they examined the bite mark. "He claimed you," she said softly. "Do you understand what that means?" "No," Alara whispered. "An alpha's claiming bite is sacred among our kind. It's how we mark our mates, creating a bond that transcends death itself." "Mates?" Alara jerked her arm back. "No, that's not. I don't even know him. He was dying and I know." Eleanor's voice was infinitely kind. "You were trying to save his life, but intent doesn't matter when it comes to bonds. The bite was given, and somehow, impossibly, you survived it." Alara's hand trembled as she touched the mark on her wrist, 2 crescent-shaped wounds that pulsed with warmth. "What happens now?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "The bite has created a bond, but it's incomplete. Without completion, you'll both suffer. The bond will pull at you, demanding fulfillment." A sound made Alara's eyes snap toward Magnus. His breathing changed, harsh, labored, panting. "He's waking," Eleanor said. Alara was already moving, her walking stick guiding her as she navigated toward him. But there was something else now, a pull she felt toward Magnus, like following a cord tied directly to her heart. She knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his chest. She could feel him now, not just with her healer's senses, but with something deeper. "Magnus," she said softly. His breathing changed. She felt him surface from unconsciousness. When he spoke, his voice was rough from disuse, heavily accented with the Ravenwood dialect. "Little Omega." Alara's breath caught. Through the bond, she realized she understood him better than his broken words should allow. The connection carried meaning beyond language, intent beyond grammar. "You saved me," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "I tried," Alara said. "I didn't mean for the bite. I didn't know." "I know. Fever. Not myself." He paused, and she felt his shame like a physical thing through their bond. "Hurt you." "I'm fine," Alara said quickly. "You're healed. That's what matters." "No." His grip tightened. "Marked you. Claimed you. Cannot unclaim." A sound outside made them both freeze. Footsteps. Many of them. Eleanor moved swiftly to the window. "Soldiers," she hissed. 20 at least, led by Victor and Samuel. Alara's blood turned to ice. "They're coming for him." "Coming for both of you," Eleanor corrected grimly. "Word has spread about what you did. Victor has convinced the council you're a witch, says you used dark magic to save a Ravenwood alpha." "No," Magnus growled. The sound was pure alpha, full of threat and fury. He tried to push himself up, but his body betrayed him. "You can't fight them," Alara said urgently. "You can barely stand." "Won't let them take you." Pounding on the door made them all jump. "Alara, open this door by order of the Ironhaven Council." Eleanor looked between them. "There's a back way through the garden." "They'll hunt us down," Alara said. "Alara, please." Lily's voice came from the loft, thick with tears. "Stay there, sweetheart," Alara called back. Then to Eleanor, "Can you get her out? Get her somewhere safe?" "Of course." "Then do it now." The pounding intensified. Wood began to splinter. Magnus's hand found Alara's face, cupping her cheek with surprising gentleness. "Trust me," he said. Before she could ask what he meant, his body began to change. She felt it through their bond, bones shifting, muscles reforming, the human form giving way to something else entirely. The door burst open. A massive silver-gray wolf stood where Magnus had been, positioned protectively between Alara and the intruders. His growl filled the small cottage, primal and terrifying. But Alara felt the bond stretching, straining. He was still too weak for this transformation. "Look at what you've brought into your home," Victor's voice was triumphant. "A monster." Samuel stepped forward, and Alara heard the distinctive sound of a blade being drawn. "Silver blade," he announced. "Perfect for putting down rabid wolves." Through their bond, Alara felt Magnus's determination. He would die protecting her, and she realized she couldn't let that happen. "Stop," she said, stepping around Magnus's massive wolf form. "You want me? Fine, I'll come willingly. Just leave him alone." "Alara, no!" Eleanor gasped, but Alara was already moving forward, hands raised in surrender. Magnus's anguished howl split the night as Samuel's men surrounded her, roughly binding her wrists. As they dragged her away, Alara felt something unexpected through the bond. Not just Magnus's rage and desperation, but a fragment of memory, a mission. He hadn't come to Ironhaven by accident. He'd been searching for something about the Shadowbane poison and its source. And in that moment, as the soldiers pushed her toward the council chambers, Alara realized the truth. The war between Ravenwood and Ironhaven had never truly ended. It had merely gone underground, and somehow she and Magnus had stumbled into the center of it all. Behind her, Magnus's howl rose again, this time joined by others, distant at first, then growing closer. The wolves of Ravenwood were coming. The council chamber stank of old wood and older prejudices. Alara stood in the center of the circular room, her wrists bound with rope that chafed against the still tender bite mark. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, sense the weight of their judgment. But worse was the absence inside her chest. The bond in her chest pulled painfully toward something that wasn't there. Magnus was gone, dragged away by Samuel's men. The separation felt like being slowly torn in half. Alara of Ironhaven. Victor's voice rang out, pitched to carry to the farthest corners of the chamber. "You stand accused of 3 crimes. First, practicing forbidden magic. Second, harboring an enemy alpha. And third, consorting with the Ravenwood territory through dark means." Murmurs rippled through the assembled council members and spectators who had gathered to witness her judgment. The scent of fear permeated the air, fear of the different, fear of the unknown. "How do you answer these charges?" Thaddeus Morrison asked. The chief magistrate was an imposing figure despite his 80 years, silver-haired and steel-spined, with eyes that had witnessed 3 decades of border conflicts. "I am a healer," Alara said steadily. "I used my gifts to save a dying man. That is not a crime in Ironhaven." "Your gifts?" Victor laughed, the sound brittle as breaking glass. "Let's be clear about what you are. Your mother was executed for witchcraft 15 years ago. Now you've revealed yourself to carry the same taint." Alara's jaw clenched. "My mother was murdered because fearful men couldn't understand what they didn't control." "Mind your tongue," Morrison snapped. "Multiple witnesses saw you use magic, golden light, unnatural healing, the same corruption your mother possessed." "It's not corruption," Alara said fiercely. "It's a gift. One that saved your grandson when he fell from the mill last winter, Magistrate." Morrison's face reddened. "Herbal remedies, nothing more." "You know that's not true." "What I know," Morrison said coldly, "is that you've bonded yourself to a Ravenwood alpha. The mark on your wrist proves it." Alara felt the bond pulse in response. Somewhere Magnus felt the same pull. He was dying. No one would help him. "He is our enemy," Victor interjected. "Magnus of Ravenwood has killed dozens of our people. Or have you forgotten the border war so quickly?" "A war that ended 30 years ago," Alara countered. "Tell that to the families who lost sons and daughters," Samuel called from the back of the chamber. "Tell that to the widows and orphans." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, angrier. Morrison raised a hand for silence. "The law is clear. Those who practice forbidden magic forfeit their right to pack protection. You are hereby banished from Ironhaven territory." A strange calm settled over Alara. She had expected this, had known it was coming from the moment she'd reached for her hidden power. "You have until sunset to leave," Morrison continued. "If you're found within our borders after nightfall, the sentence is death." "And what about Lily?" Alara's voice cracked on the name. "The foundling will be placed with a proper family," Victor said smoothly. "No," Alara lunged forward, stopped by guards who grabbed her arms. "You can't take her from me." "You have no legal claim to the child," Morrison said. "This council's decision is final." The bond suddenly flared with rage that wasn't her own. Magnus knew. Even separated, he knew what they were doing to her. Alara could feel his fury building like a storm on the horizon. "There is one alternative," Victor said, stepping closer. His voice dropped, meant only for her ears. "Renounce the bond. Use your magic to sever the tie with the Alpha. Do that, and perhaps the council would reconsider. You could keep the child. Stay in your home." For a moment, Alara was tempted. Everything she'd known could be saved. But the bond thrummed in her chest, telling her the truth. Severing it wouldn't just hurt Magnus. It would destroy something fundamental in both of them. "I can't," she whispered. "Can't or won't?" "Both." Alara lifted her chin. "The bond isn't something that can be cut like rope. It's woven into our life forces. To sever it would kill us both." She felt the truth of it as she spoke. The bond might be incomplete, but it was also keeping them alive. Two flames burning brighter together. "Then you've made your choice," Morrison said coldly. "Guards, escort her to her cottage. She has until sunset." As they dragged her toward the door, Alara heard Victor speak quietly to Samuel. "Make sure she actually leaves, and if the Ravenwood Alpha tries to follow her, I know what to do," Samuel replied grimly. They were going to kill Magnus the moment he tried to leave Ironhaven lands. Back in her cottage, Alara moved with purpose, packing only what she could carry. Her hands found precious herbs, sealed packets of medicines she'd spent years perfecting. Her fingers lingered on familiar objects, the mortar and pestle that had been her mother's, the blanket Lily favored on cold nights. Lily clung to her, sobbing. "I don't want you to go. Please, Mama Alara." "Shh." Alara smoothed Lily's hair, her own tears falling silently. "You're strong and brave, little one." "No." Lily pulled back, and Alara could hear the determination in her voice. "I'm coming with you." "They won't let you." "Then we'll run. We'll go through the forest. They can't stop us." "They'll hunt us down," Alara said gently. "At least this way, you're safe." "I don't want safe," Lily said fiercely. "I want you." A sound outside made them both freeze, not the guards. This was coming from the back of the cottage, from the forest that bordered her small garden. Alara tilted her head, focusing her senses. There, a presence she knew as well as her own heartbeat now. "Magnus," she breathed. She moved to the window facing the forest. "What do you see?" Alara whispered to Lily. "It's him," Lily said, awe in her voice. "He's at the tree line. And Alara, there are wolves with him. Many wolves." Alara leaned out the window. "You have to leave," she said urgently. "They're going to kill you if you try to take me. It's a trap." For a long moment, silence. Then Magnus's voice, rough and determined. "I don't leave my mate." The word hit Alara like a physical blow. Mate. Through the bond, she felt the absolute truth of it. A connection forged not by accident or circumstance, but by something deeper, souls recognizing their other half. "This bond," Magnus continued, his voice closer now, "not accident. Felt it from moment you touched me. Life calling to life." "Magnus, please." "Come with me," he said simply. "Leave this place that would kill you for being what you are. My pack doesn't fear magic. They celebrate it." Alara's hands gripped the windowsill. "What about Lily?" "She comes too. Any who matter to you matter to me." Run into the forest with a man she'd known for 2 days. Leave everything for a territory she'd been taught to fear since childhood. But staying meant losing Lily anyway, meant living without the other half of her soul. The bond pulsed with certainty, with protection, with belonging. "The guards will stop us," Alara said. "Let them try." A howl split the air, not Magnus, but one of the wolves with him. It was answered by another, then another, until the forest sang with the sound of a pack claiming territory. "Alara!" a guard shouted from the front of the cottage. "What's happening back there?" "Now," Magnus urged through the bond. "Trust me." Alara had 3 seconds to make a choice that would define the rest of her life. She chose. "Lily, grab your pack. We're leaving." They slipped through the back door, Magnus's massive hand engulfing Alara's as he guided her into the forest. Lily stayed close to her other side, small fingers clutching her skirt. The wolves flanked them, their presence a silent, protective barrier between the small group and Ironhaven. They hadn't made it 20 paces before shouts erupted behind them. "There! The witch is fleeing!" Arrows whistled through the air. One struck a tree inches from Alara's head, and she felt Magnus's rage explode through their bond. He shifted instantly, transforming into his wolf form, positioning himself between them and their pursuers. "Keep running!" Alara gasped to Lily, pulling her deeper into the forest, but her body was betraying her. The incomplete bond sapped her strength, making her movements clumsy. Her foot caught on a root, and she went down hard, pain shooting up her ankle. "Alara!" Lily tried to pull her up. Magnus was there instantly, shifting back to human form. His arms came around her, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. "Hold on," he said, his voice strained with effort. He shifted again, not to wolf, but to something between, larger than any natural wolf, with intelligence burning in golden eyes and power radiating from every inch of his form. An alpha in his true form, neither fully human nor fully beast. Alara clung to his fur as he ran. Lily pressed against his side. The sounds of pursuit grew closer, not fading as she'd hoped. "They're hurting us," Alara realized with horror. "Samuel is driving us toward the Shadow Grove border." The Shadow Grove, the cursed forest where even wolves feared to tread, the place from which no traveler returned whole, if they returned at all. "Magnus, we have to turn back." But it was too late. She felt the shift in the air, the wrongness that crawled across her skin like insects. They'd crossed from natural forest into something other. The Shadow Grove welcomed them with silence so complete it felt like entering a tomb. Magnus slowed, his body tense beneath her. Even he feared this place. Behind them, the pursuit stopped at the border. Samuel's voice called out, "You've sealed your own fate. The Shadow Grove takes everyone. You'll be dead by morning." Laughter from the Ironhaven guards, then retreating footsteps. Magnus shifted back to human form, setting Alara and Lily gently on the ground. "Need to keep moving," he said quietly. "This place, it hungers." "For what?" Lily whispered. "Magic," Magnus replied. "It feeds on those with power." As if summoned by his words, the air around them began to shimmer. Shadows that weren't quite shadows, detached from the trees, drifting toward them with curious hunger. Alara felt them before she saw them, voids in the world, empty spaces that wanted to be filled. "Don't let them touch you," Magnus said urgently. He pulled both Alara and Lily close, his body becoming their shield. But there were too many. They came from all directions, drawn by the beacon of power that Alara and Magnus together created. One brushed against Alara's arm, and agony lanced through her. It wasn't pain exactly. It was absence, the feeling of something vital being drained away. She cried out, and Magnus roared his fury. Golden light exploded from him, alpha power in its purest form, driving the shadows back momentarily, but it only made them hungrier. The shadows surged forward again, more desperate than before. "We're going to die here," Lily sobbed. "No," Alara said fiercely. She pulled Lily close, feeling Magnus's arms around them both. But even as she denied it, something inside her stirred. The same power that had healed Magnus, but deeper, older. A memory rose unbidden, her mother's voice on the last night they'd spent together. "The shadows are not our enemies, Alara. They are souls without anchors, fragments seeking to be whole. The first soul healers didn't mend bodies. They mended the torn places between worlds." The shadows pressed closer. Magnus's power was fading. Alara made a choice. She let go of her fear, her control, her careful hiding. She opened herself to the full force of what she was. Light poured from her, not golden like Magnus's alpha power, but silver-white like moonlight, the color of spirit healing, of mending breaks in the soul itself rather than the body. It didn't attack the shadows. Instead, it transformed them, filling their emptiness with peace. The moment her power touched the nearest shadow, it froze. Then slowly, it began to change. The darkness gained definition, revealing the faint outline of a human form, a woman with her arms outstretched. "Mother?" Alara whispered, recognition flooding through her. The shadow didn't speak, but Alara felt rather than heard the response. Not your mother, but like her, soul healer, fractured, waiting. Magnus's arms tightened around her. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "They're not monsters," Alara said, wonder in her voice. "They're soul healers like me, like my mother. Their souls were trapped here when they died." The shadow woman moved closer, reaching out. This time, Alara didn't flinch. She extended her hand, and their fingers touched. Instead of pain, she felt connection, understanding flowing between them. "We have waited for one who could see us, one who could release us." "How?" Alara asked. "How do I free you?" "Complete the bond, become whole, then you will know." The shadow woman withdrew, backing away to join the others that now surrounded them in a wide circle. No longer threatening, but waiting, watching. "They want me to complete the bond with you," Alara said to Magnus, her voice shaking. "They say it's the only way we can find our path through the Shadow Grove." Magnus was silent for a long moment. "The claiming ritual," he finally said. "It's sacred. Should happen under moonlight before the pack, with proper preparation." "We don't have time," Alara said. "The shadows say we need to become whole to escape this place." "And if it kills you?" The fear in his voice was palpable. "The claiming bite. Most Omegas don't survive it." Alara reached up, her fingers finding his face in the darkness. She traced his features, the strong jaw, the high cheekbones, the lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of a life of both laughter and pain. And, "I survived your first bite," she said softly. "I'll survive this one too." Through their bond, she felt his hesitation, his fear for her, but also his recognition of truth. They couldn't stay here, trapped between Ironhaven's hunters and the Shadow Grove's hungry spirits. "What about me?" Lily's small voice broke through. "What do I do?" "Stand within our circle," Magnus said. "The claiming power will protect you too." Magnus guided them to a small clearing where moonlight filtered through the twisted branches above. The shadows followed, forming a wider circle around them. "Kneel," Magnus instructed Alara gently. "Face the moon." Alara did as he asked, feeling the cool forest floor beneath her knees. Lily pressed against her back, small arms wrapped around her waist. Magnus knelt behind them both, his massive body encompassing them. She felt him shift, his alpha energy swelling as he allowed his wolf nature to rise closer to the surface. "This will hurt," he warned, his voice deepening with the change. "But I will be as gentle as I can." Alara tilted her head to the side, baring her neck in the ancient gesture of submission. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. His lips found her throat, pressing against her pulse. Through their bond, she felt his reverence, his wonder that she would trust him with this. His teeth grazed her skin, testing. "I claim you as my mate," he said, the formal words rumbling through his chest. "Body to body, soul to soul, life to life." Then his teeth sank deep into the soft flesh where her neck met her shoulder. Pain exploded through her, white-hot and all-consuming. But unlike the first bite, this one continued, deepening as Magnus's alpha essence poured into her. Alara's scream caught in her throat as her body began to change, not shifting like a wolf, but something more fundamental. Her cells rewrote themselves, her DNA adapting to accommodate the bond. Human Omega giving way to something that could match an alpha's power. Through their connection, she felt Magnus's fear. He wanted to stop, but Alara's hands locked behind his head, holding him in place. "Don't stop," she gasped. "Don't you dare stop." The shadows drew closer, their energy feeding into the ceremony. Alara felt their support like hands lifting her up. And then, when the pain had reached a crescendo that threatened to tear her apart, it stopped. Not gradually, but all at once, like stepping from fire into cool water. Magnus released her throat, his tongue moving gently over the wound to close it. Alara sagged against him, gasping, shaking. Alive, more than alive, reborn. "Look at me," Magnus whispered urgently. "Please, look at me." Alara opened her eyes, expecting the same darkness that had been her world since birth. Instead, she saw light. Colors bloomed before her, silver moonlight, the deep green of the forest, the golden glow of Magnus's eyes. Shapes formed and sharpened, revealing a world she'd only ever known through touch and sound. And Magnus's face, finally revealed, strong and fierce and beautiful, with eyes that blazed with golden wolf light. Scars marked his left cheek and brow, telling stories of battles fought and survived. But it was the gentleness in his expression, the wonder and joy as he watched her, that took her breath away. "You're crying," she whispered in wonder, watching tears track down his cheeks. "So are you," he replied, his voice breaking. "I can see," Alara breathed. "Magnus, I can see you." Lily moved around to face them, her small face coming into focus for the first time. She was beautiful, dark hair framing a heart-shaped face, eyes wide with astonishment as she watched Alara take in the world with new sight. "Your eyes," Lily whispered. "They're silver now, like starlight." The shadows around them had changed too. They were no longer formless voids, but translucent figures, men and women of all ages, watching with peaceful expressions. As Alara looked at them, they began to fade, their forms dissolving into motes of light that drifted upward through the trees. "We are released." The thought came not in words, but in feeling, gratitude washing over her. "The path is clear. Follow the silver stream to the border." As the last of the shadows vanished, a faint trail appeared before them, not a physical path, but a shimmer in the air, visible only to Alara's new sight. "There," she pointed. "That's our way out." Magnus helped her to her feet. She swayed, still adjusting to the changes in her body, to the overwhelming input of visual information after a lifetime of darkness. "My turn," she said softly. Magnus's eyes widened. "You don't have to." "I want to," Alara interrupted. "A true bond goes both ways. You marked me. Now I mark you." She saw the moment he understood, saw his pupils dilate with desire and something deeper, trust. He tilted his head, baring his throat to her, an alpha submitting to his omega. In that moment, Alara understood the true meaning of the bond, not dominance, but balance, each surrendering to the other in perfect equality. Alara's newly sharp teeth found the spot where his pulse beat strongest. She didn't hesitate. She bit down, claiming him as thoroughly as he'd claimed her. The bond exploded between them, no longer a connection, but a fusion. Two souls crashed together and merged, becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. Through Magnus's eyes, Alara saw herself, fierce and luminous, marked and mated and magnificent. Through her eyes, Magnus saw himself, not the war leader feared across territories, but simply a man who'd found his home. When Alara finally released him, sealing the wound with her tongue, they stood together in the center of the clearing, bound so tightly that neither could tell where one ended and the other began. Lily watched them with wide eyes. "Your faces," she whispered. "You're both glowing." Magnus reached for the child, drawing her into their embrace. "Pack," he said simply. "We are pack now." Alara felt the truth of it settle into her bones. The three of them, bound by choice rather than blood, had become a family in the heart of the Shadow Grove. "We need to keep moving," Magnus said after a moment. "The path won't last forever." "Where will we go?" Alara asked, though she already knew the answer. "Home," Magnus replied. "To Ravenwood." As they followed the silver path through the twisted trees, Alara marveled at the world revealed through her new sight. Each leaf, each branch, each shadow and patch of moonlight was a miracle to her eyes. But more miraculous still was the feeling of Magnus's hand in hers and Lily's small form pressed against her side. For the first time in her life, Alara was moving toward something, not just away, toward a place where her gifts would be celebrated, not feared, toward a future with the mate the universe had chosen for her. Through their bond, Magnus shared fragments of memory and knowledge, images of Ravenwood with its ancient trees and stone buildings, its proud traditions and wise leaders, and something else, something he'd kept hidden until now. "The Shadowbane poison," Alara said, picking up the thread of his thoughts. "That's why you were in Ironhaven. You were tracking its source." Magnus nodded grimly. "It's being made again. After 30 years, someone has rediscovered the formula. My father, King Alaric, sent me to find who." "Your father?" Alara stopped short. "You're the Prince of Ravenwood?" A wry smile touched Magnus's lips. "I am the heir, though I've spent more time on battlefields than in court." Lily gazed up at him in wonder. "A real prince," she breathed. "And now," Magnus said, his eyes never leaving Alara's, "you are my princess. When we reach Ravenwood, you'll need to be prepared. The court will test you. Not everyone will welcome an Ironhaven Omega as their future queen." Alara should have felt overwhelmed. In the space of 2 days, she'd gone from outcast healer to bonded mate of a prince, from blind to sighted, from exile to potential queen. Yet through the bond, she felt only certainty. This was her path, had always been her path, though she hadn't known it until now. "I'll be ready," she promised. As they neared the edge of the Shadow Grove, the trees thinned and normal forest sounds returned, the rustle of night creatures, the whisper of wind through leaves. Magnus's wolves melted out of the darkness to join them, forming a protective circle around their alpha and his new family. Ahead lay Ravenwood territory, and a future filled with both promise and peril. Behind them, the shadows of the Shadow Grove retreated, their purpose fulfilled. Alara took a deep breath of the clean night air and stepped forward into her new life, eyes wide open at last. Dawn broke over the Ravenwood border like a whispered promise. Alara stood at the edge of a vast clearing, her newly gifted sight drinking in the landscape spread before her. Unlike the cramped, suspicious architecture of Ironhaven, with its narrow streets and closed shutters, Ravenwood sprawled in harmony with the forest that gave it its name. Structures rose organically from the earth, some carved into ancient trees, others built of stone and timber in graceful spirals that reached toward the sky. "It's beautiful," she breathed, the words inadequate for the wonder filling her chest. Magnus stood beside her, his hand warm in hers. Through their bond, she felt his pride in his homeland, tempered with caution. "The beauty hides danger," he said quietly. "Not everyone will welcome you." "Because I'm from Ironhaven?" "Because you're powerful," he corrected. "And power always threatens someone." The wolf pack that had escorted them through the night began to shift, fur receding as they returned to human form. Alara watched in fascination as men and women emerged from wolf shapes, their movements fluid and practiced. Unlike Magnus's painful transformation when wounded, theirs seemed effortless, a dance between forms they'd performed countless times. Alpha, a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair, approached and bowed her head slightly. "Word has been sent to the palace. The king awaits your return." "Thank you, Sarah," Magnus replied. "This is Alara, my mate, and Lily, her ward." Sarah's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as she took in Alara's silver eyes and the claiming mark visible on her neck. "The healing worked," she said, "and more, it seems." "Much more," Magnus agreed, pride evident in his voice. Sarah knelt to Lily's level, her stern features softening. "You must be exhausted, little one. Would you like to ride on my back the rest of the way?" Lily looked up at Alara, uncertain. At her encouraging nod, Lily's face broke into a smile. "You can turn into a wolf too?" "I can," Sarah answered, her lips quirking upward. "A gray one, not as large as our alpha, but swift." As Sarah transformed and Lily climbed onto her wolf back with delighted giggles, Alara felt a surge of gratitude. This acceptance of the child, this immediate inclusion of her in the pack, spoke volumes about the society they were entering. "Come," Magnus said softly. "It's time to meet my father." The journey to the Ravenwood Palace took less than an hour, but for Alara, it was a lifetime of discovery. Every bird that flew overhead, every flower that dotted the path, every shift of sunlight through leaves was a revelation to eyes that had never before known color or form. Several times she stopped, overwhelmed by beauty, and each time Magnus waited patiently, his pleasure in her joy flowing through their bond. The palace itself was unlike anything Alara could have imagined. Not a single structure, but a complex of buildings integrated with living trees, stone archways embraced by ancient roots, windows of stained glass that cast rainbow patterns across moss-covered floors. Guards in leather armor bearing the silver leaf emblem of Ravenwood stood at attention as they passed, their expressions carefully neutral. "They're uncertain," Magnus explained through the bond. "They sense something different about you." "I'm terrified," Alara admitted, the words spoken directly into his mind. His hand squeezed hers. "So am I, but not of them, of failing you." Before she could respond, massive wooden doors swung open, revealing the throne room. Unlike the cold stone halls of Ironhaven's council chamber, this space breathed with life. The ceiling opened to the sky in places, allowing sunlight to filter through a canopy of leaves. The floor was inlaid with spiraling patterns of wood and stone that seemed to flow like water. And on a throne carved from a single massive tree root sat an old man who could only be King Alaric. Though his hair had gone white and lines mapped his face like ancient paths, his eyes burned with the same golden fire as his son's. Beside him stood a younger man with calculating eyes, close enough in features to Magnus to be kin, but lacking the warmth that radiated from her mate. "My son returns." Alaric's voice filled the chamber, strong despite the weakness evident in his frame. "And not alone, it seems." Magnus led Alara forward, stopping at a respectful distance from the throne. "Father, I present to you Alara of Ironhaven, my bonded mate." Murmurs erupted throughout the hall. The king's eyes widened, then narrowed as he took in the claiming marks visible on both their necks. "A fully bonded mate?" Alaric leaned forward. "After all these years of refusal, you return with not just any mate, but an Ironhaven woman?" "Not just any Ironhaven woman," the man beside the throne said, his voice silk over steel. "If I'm not mistaken, this is the daughter of Helena, the witch executed 15 years ago." Alara's breath caught. How did he know her mother's name? "This is my brother Thomas," Magnus said, tension evident in his posture. "My father's military commander." "And the most vocal opponent of peace with Ironhaven," Thomas added with a cold smile. "Tell me, brother, did you consider the political implications of bringing an enemy into our midst? Or did your knot do your thinking for you?" A growl rumbled in Magnus's chest, but Alara stepped forward before he could respond. "My mother was no witch," she said clearly, her voice carrying through the hall. "She was a soul healer, as am I, and I am no enemy of Ravenwood, Commander Thomas. I saved your brother's life when your own people could not." Thomas's eyebrows shot up at her directness. Bold words for a newcomer. "Enough," Alaric commanded. He rose from his throne with effort, waving away attendants who moved to assist him. "Come closer, daughter of Helena." Alara approached the throne, feeling Magnus's concern pulse through their bond. The king's scent reached her. Beneath the medicinal herbs and aging flesh, there was something wrong, something that reminded her of the Shadowbane poison. "Your eyes," Alaric said quietly when she stood before him. "They were not always silver, were they?" "I was blind from birth, Your Majesty," Alara answered. "The bonding gave me sight." "Impossible," Thomas muttered. "And yet, here she stands," Alaric replied. "A blind Omega who not only survived a full Alpha claiming, but gained new senses from it." His gaze shifted to Magnus. "The mission, my son. What did you discover?" Magnus's face darkened. "The Shadowbane has returned, as we feared. I tracked its source to Ironhaven, but was captured before I could identify the creator. Victor, their council advisor, seems heavily involved." "Victor?" Alara's surprise echoed through the hall. He's been experimenting with Shadowbane? You know this man? Alaric asked. He's the one who captured me, who sold me to Alara at the marketplace, Magnus explained. He's also the one who accused me of witchcraft before the council, Alara added. He seemed particularly eager to see me banished or executed. Thomas stepped down from the dais, circling Alara with predatory grace. Convenient that you appeared just as Shadowbane resurfaces. Perhaps you're the source our spies have been seeking. If I were creating Shadowbane, why would I heal your brother of its effects? Alara countered. To gain our trust, to infiltrate our leadership. That's enough, Thomas, Alaric said sharply. The girl bears a completed bond mark. No spy would go to such lengths, nor could they fake such a thing. A commotion at the entrance to the throne room interrupted them. Sarah entered in human form, Lily at her side. The child's face lit up when she saw Alara, and she ran forward despite the guards who moved to intercept her. Alara! Lily barreled into her, small arms wrapping around her waist. There are children here who can turn into cubs, and Sarah showed me the kitchens, and they gave me honey cakes, and— She broke off, suddenly aware of the audience. Oh, is that the king? Alaric's stern expression cracked, a smile warming his weathered face. Indeed I am, little one. And who might you be? I'm Lily, she answered, offering a clumsy curtsy that made several courtiers smile. Alara takes care of me. Does she now? Alaric's eyes moved between Alara and the child, assessing. And how did you come to be in her care? My parents died in the fever 2 years ago, Lily explained with the straightforward manner of children. Nobody wanted me because I'm not good at anything useful, but Alara said I didn't need to be useful to be worthy of love. A thoughtful silence followed her words. Alara felt something shift in the room, a softening perhaps, or a reassessment. Wise words, Alaric finally said, and rare ones, especially from Ironhaven. He returned to his throne, sinking into it with barely concealed pain. Magnus, you and your mate will join me for a private dinner. Until then, show her to your quarters and let her rest. The child can stay with Sarah's grandchildren. They appear to be of similar age. And what of the Shadowbane, father? Thomas pressed. If it's being produced in Ironhaven, then we will address it, Alaric cut him off. But not before we have all the facts. Dismissed. As they left the throne room, Alara felt the weight of dozens of stares following them. Through the bond, Magnus's emotions were a complex tangle, relief at their initial acceptance, concern for his father's health, and a deep, simmering worry about the Shadowbane and its implications. Your father is ill, Alara said once they were alone in a corridor of polished wood, and not from any natural disease. Magnus stopped, turning to face her. How did you know? I can sense it. The same wrongness I felt in your wound, but slower, more insidious. She touched his cheek gently. How long has he been sick? 6 months, Magnus answered, his voice dropping to a whisper. Our healers can find no cause, no cure. He weakens by the day. Shadowbane? We thought so at first, but there's no entry wound, no black veins, just a slow draining of his strength, his life force. Alara's mind raced with possibilities, with connections forming between disparate pieces. Magnus, what if the Shadowbane has evolved? What if someone has found a way to make it more subtle, harder to detect? Before he could answer, a new voice interrupted them. An interesting theory from our newest royal consort. Alara turned to see an elderly man in dark robes approaching, his steps slow but purposeful. Despite his apparent age, he moved with surprising fluidity, and his eyes, a piercing blue that seemed to see through flesh to bone, were sharp with intelligence. Liege Healer Malcolm. Magnus greeted him with evident respect. May I present my mate, Alara? The Soul Healer, Malcolm nodded. Your arrival has set the entire palace abuzz with speculation. Some say you're a spy, others a witch. A few even claim you're Helena reborn. You knew my mother? Alara asked. Malcolm's expression remained unreadable. I knew of her. Her reputation crossed our borders, even in those days. a healer of extraordinary gifts, they said. Gifts that got her killed, Alara said quietly. Yes, Ironhaven has always feared what it cannot control. Malcolm studied her with unnerving intensity. And now her daughter returns to us with silver eyes and the ability to cure Shadowbane. Fascinating. Something about the way he said it sent a chill down Alara's spine. Through the bond, she felt Magnus's caution spike. The king mentioned dinner, she said, eager to change the subject. I should prepare. Of course, Malcolm bowed slightly. But perhaps, when you have settled, you might visit the healing chambers. I would be most interested in discussing your techniques. As he glided away, Alara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I don't trust him, she admitted through the bond. Nor should you, Magnus replied the same way. Malcolm has served as royal healer for 40 years. He knows more secrets than anyone in Ravenwood, but his loyalty... He let the thought trail off. Magnus's quarters proved to be a spacious suite high in one of the living trees, with windows that opened to panoramic views of the forest. Alara moved from room to room, marveling at the craftsmanship that had shaped living wood into furniture, at the soft furs that covered the bed, at the shelves lined with books she could now miraculously read. It's overwhelming, she said, sinking onto the edge of the bed. Yesterday I was an outcast healer. Today I'm mated to a prince and can see the world for the first time. Magnus knelt before her, taking her hands in his. Do you regret it? The bond? No, Alara said without hesitation. Through their connection, she let him feel the truth of it, the completeness, the rightness she felt despite all the chaos. But I am afraid. Your brother clearly despises me. Malcolm watches me like I'm some rare specimen to dissect, and I know nothing of court politics or royal protocols. You don't need to, Magnus assured her. Just be yourself, the woman who faced down Victor to save an enemy, who braved the Shadow Grove, who sees the soul beneath the skin. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. When Magnus opened it, Eleanor stood there, arms full of clothing. I thought the Alpha's mate might need something appropriate for dinner with the king, she said, laying several gowns on the bed. The blue brings out the silver in your eyes, she added to Alara with a wink. As Eleanor helped her dress, she shared news of Lily. The child has already made herself at home with the other cubs. She seems to have a natural affinity for our ways. She adapts quickly, Alara said, smiling as Eleanor fastened the back of the gown. It's how she survived in Ironhaven. About Ironhaven, Eleanor's voice grew serious. There's news you should hear before dinner. Scouts report unusual activity along the border. Soldiers gathering, weapons being distributed. Alara's heart sank. Because of me? Perhaps. Or perhaps the Shadowbane connection has them nervous. Eleanor adjusted the gown's neckline to display the claiming mark proudly. Either way, tensions are rising. The king will want your perspective. Dinner with Alaric took place not in a formal dining hall, but in a small, private garden atrium deep within the palace. The king was already seated when they arrived, looking frailer in the soft evening light. Come, he gestured to the chairs arranged around a low table laden with food. Let us speak freely, without the court's 100 ears listening. Once they were settled, Alaric studied Alara openly. So you are Helena's daughter. I wondered if you knew. That you and my mother were acquainted? Alara asked carefully. A sad smile touched the king's lips. More than acquainted, child. Helena and I met during the last years of the border war. She was a healer working in the contested lands, treating wounded from both sides. My mother never spoke of the war, Alara said. She wouldn't have. After what happened, she chose to hide her past. And her gifts. Alaric's gaze grew distant with memory. She healed me once, after a particularly brutal battle. I had taken a blade meant for one of my soldiers. The wound festered beyond the skill of our healers. They said I would die. But my mother saved you, Alara guessed, with the same silver light I've heard you possess, soul healing, the rarest gift of all. Alaric's eyes were keen despite his apparent weakness. Do you know why such healers are so rare, Alara? She shook her head. Because they are hunted, feared. Throughout history, those with the power to heal souls have been persecuted by those who would rather break them. He leaned forward. Your mother fled to Ironhaven not by chance, but because it was the last place anyone would look for a soul healer, in the very heart of those who despised magic. You knew where she was, Magnus said, surprise evident in his voice. All these years you knew and said nothing. It was her choice, Alaric replied simply. And I honored it, until they killed her. The last words emerged as a growl, wolf-like even in his human form. By then, it was too late to save her, but not too late to watch over her daughter. Alara's mind reeled. You've been watching me? From a distance, enough to know you inherited your mother's gift, enough to ensure you weren't immediately executed as she was. Alaric's expression hardened. What I didn't know was that Victor had discovered your identity. He knows I'm Helena's daughter, but I don't think he knows about you, Alara said. Not me specifically, Alaric agreed, but he suspects there was a connection between Helena and Ravenwood. Why else push so hard for your banishment rather than a simple execution? He wanted to force you toward us. A trap, Magnus concluded, using Alara as bait to lure us into the open. But why? Alara asked. What does Victor gain from renewing conflict between our territories? Power, Alaric said simply. War creates opportunities for those willing to sacrifice others. And Shadowbane, he broke off, a spasm of pain crossing his face. Father? Magnus was instantly at his side. Alaric waved him away, composing himself with visible effort. I'm fine, just tired. But Alara saw the lie for what it was. The king was dying, consumed from within by something that echoed the Shadowbane that had nearly killed Magnus. My liege, she said formally, with your permission, I would like to examine you, as a healer. Alaric's eyes met hers, wolf gold to silver. You see it, don't you? The corruption. I sense it, Alara corrected. Not like Magnus's wound. There's no visible mark, but the energy signature is similar. Malcolm has found nothing, Alaric said. Malcolm isn't a soul healer. Alara rose and moved to kneel beside the king's chair. May I? After a moment's hesitation, Alaric nodded. Alara placed her hands gently on his chest, closing her eyes to focus better. Beneath her palms, she felt the king's heartbeat, strong but erratic, fighting against an invisible invader. She reached deeper with her senses, past flesh and bone to the currents of energy that flowed through all living things. In a healthy person, these currents ran clear and bright. In Alaric, they were clouded, clogged with something dark and viscous. Not Shadowbane exactly, but related. Perhaps a refined version, as she'd theorized earlier. Someone is poisoning you, she said softly, opening her eyes. Slowly, carefully, so it mimics natural decline. Magnus's shock and rage surged through the bond. Who? He demanded. I don't know yet, Alara answered. But the poison enters through something you consume regularly. Tea, perhaps, or medicine. My evening tonic, Alaric breathed. Malcolm prepares it himself, has for months now. The pieces clicked into place with terrible clarity. We need to get you away from here, Alara said urgently. Away from Malcolm. Alaric shook his head. If Malcolm is indeed the traitor, running would only confirm his suspicions and perhaps force his hand. No, we must proceed carefully. His eyes hardened with determination. Tomorrow, you will visit the healing chambers as Malcolm requested. Express interest in his methods, his medicines. Learn what you can. And if he recognizes what I am, what I can see, then we will know for certain he is our enemy, Alaric said grimly. As they left the garden, a figure slipped out from behind a column. Thomas, his face unreadable as he watched them pass. That night, as Alara lay beside Magnus in his bed, their bond hummed with shared concerns. The revelations about her mother, the poisoning of the king, the looming threat from Ironhaven, it was almost too much to process. What are you thinking? Magnus asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. About my mother, Alara answered. All these years, I thought she died because Ironhaven feared her healing gifts. But what if there was more to it? What if she was killed because of her connection to your father? Magnus was quiet for a long moment. It would mean her death wasn't random cruelty, but targeted assassination. And Victor may have been involved even then. Alara turned to face him, finding his golden eyes in the darkness. Magnus, what if the Shadowbanes return and your father's poisoning aren't separate issues? What if they're part of the same plan? A plan to reignite the war, Magnus concluded. But why now, after 30 years of uneasy peace? Before Alara could respond, a soft knock sounded at their door. Magnus rose, pulling on a robe before answering. Sarah stood in the corridor, her face tight with concern. Forgive the intrusion, Alpha, but there's something you need to see. They followed her to a small viewing chamber high in the palace where a telescope pointed toward the border with Ironhaven. Through the lens, Alara could see pinpricks of light moving through the forest, torches, dozens of them, advancing steadily toward Ravenwood territory. They crossed the border an hour ago, Sarah reported. 50 men at least, heavily armed. Victor isn't waiting, Magnus growled. He's making his move now. Alara's blood ran cold as another realization struck her. Magnus, where's Lily? With the other children in the nursery, Sarah answered. Why? We need to get to her now, Alara said, already moving toward the door. If there's a traitor within Ravenwood working with Victor... She didn't need to finish. Magnus was instantly alert, striding swiftly beside her through the palace corridors. The bond between them thrummed with shared urgency. But as they approached the nursery wing, a scream split the night, high and terrified and unmistakably Lily's. They ran, following the sound to a small courtyard where moonlight illuminated a scene from nightmares. Malcolm stood over Lily's small form, a silver dagger in his hand. The child was bound, a cloth stuffed in her mouth to muffle her cries. "Stop!" Magnus roared, his body already beginning to shift. Malcolm turned, and in the moonlight, his eyes gleamed not blue, but black, entirely black, as if filled with liquid shadow. "Too late, young prince," he said, his voice somehow doubled, as if two people spoke at once. "The vessel is prepared. The gateway opens." Alara lunged forward as Malcolm raised the dagger, but she wasn't fast enough. The blade plunged down toward Lily's heart. Time slowed as the dagger descended toward Lily's heart. Alara's scream tore through the night, her newly awakened power surging in response to the threat. Silver light erupted from her fingertips, faster than thought, wrapping around Malcolm's arm and freezing it mid-strike. "No!" The word emerged as both command and power, the first direct manifestation of her soul healer abilities beyond healing itself. Magnus was already in motion, his transformation complete, massive wolf form launching across the courtyard. His jaws locked around Malcolm's shoulder, tearing him away from Lily's prone form. But Malcolm was not what he appeared. As the wolf's teeth sank into his flesh, his body warped and twisted, skin turning to smoke that slipped from Magnus's grip. The healer's form reassembled several yards away, the black emptiness of his eyes spreading across his face like spilled ink. "The child is the key," Malcolm's doubled voice echoed unnaturally. "Her blood opens the way." Alara rushed to Lily, swiftly cutting her bonds with the claws that had extended from her fingertips, another gift of the completed bond. She pulled the cloth from the child's mouth and gathered her close, positioning herself between Lily and the transformed healer. "What are you?" Alara demanded, maintaining the silver shield of energy around them both. Malcolm's head tilted at an impossible angle, a grotesque smile splitting his face. "I am the Collector, the shadow that walks, the first to cross." His gaze shifted to Magnus, who circled him warily in wolf form. "Your father should have died in the war. Helena should have let him bleed out. 30 years I've waited to finish what began that day." Through their bond, Alara felt Magnus's shock. His father had mentioned Helena saving him during the war, but not the circumstances. Not that someone had wanted the king dead even then. "You've been poisoning King Alaric," Alara said, the pieces clicking into place. "The same way you poisoned Magnus with Shadowbane." Malcolm, or the thing wearing Malcolm's form, laughed, the sound like stones grinding together. "Poison? No, girl. Preparation. The Shadowbane doesn't kill. It transforms. It opens the door between worlds. Your mate was to be the vessel, but he proved too strong." His black gaze fixed on Lily. "The child, though, pure, untouched by the bond. She is perfect." Horror dawned as Alara understood. The Shadowbane wasn't just a weapon. It was a gateway, a means for something to enter this world by possessing a prepared host. And whatever spoke through Malcolm had been attempting this for decades. Sarah burst into the courtyard, two younger wolves at her side. "The king has raised the alarm," she called. "Ironhaven forces are within our borders, led by Victor himself." The thing inside Malcolm smiled wider. "Right on time." With blinding speed, he lunged toward Lily again, black energy crackling around his hands. Magnus intercepted, his massive form slamming into Malcolm and carrying them both across the courtyard and into a stone wall. "Take Lily to the inner sanctum," Alara instructed Sarah. "Don't leave her alone for a moment." The older woman hesitated. "What about you?" "I need to help Magnus. Then we have to warn the king. This isn't just an invasion. It's a coordinated attack from within and without." Alara pressed Lily into Sarah's arms. "Go!" As Sarah and the other wolves escorted Lily to safety, Alara turned back to the battle. Magnus was powerful, but whatever inhabited Malcolm moved with unnatural quickness, black energy lashing out like tentacles to counter Magnus's attacks. Alara closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. The soul healer power flowed through her veins, stronger since the bond's completion. She could see it now. Not just the darkness in Malcolm, but its source, its nature. It wasn't human. It never had been. It came from somewhere else, a place between worlds where souls and shadows blurred. She opened her eyes, silver light pouring from them like liquid moonlight. "Magnus, move away from him!" she called out. Sensing her intent through their bond, Magnus leaped back, putting distance between himself and the possessed healer. Alara raised her hands, focusing her power into a concentrated beam that struck Malcolm in the chest. The effect was immediate and horrifying. His body convulsed, mouth opening in a silent scream as the silver light pierced through the darkness within him. For an instant, Alara could see two entities, Malcolm himself, old and frail, his true form trapped within the larger shadow that had consumed him. "Help me," the real Malcolm's voice broke through, weak but desperate. "It's been inside me for years. I couldn't stop it." The shadow entity roared in rage, fighting against Alara's light. The struggle was draining her quickly, her power still new and untested. Through the bond, she felt Magnus's concern as her strength began to falter. Suddenly, a new presence entered the courtyard. King Alaric, leaning heavily on a staff but radiating authority, stepped into the moonlight. "I sense the disturbance," he said, his voice stronger than it had been at dinner. "The shadows are moving again." The possessed Malcolm turned toward the king, hatred contorting his features. "Alaric," he spat, "you should have died by my hand decades ago." "I recognize you now," Alaric said, his eyes narrowing. "The Shadow General. We faced each other on the last day of the border war. My forces had you surrounded, your defeat certain." "Until I found another way to victory," the entity hissed, "a way through the spaces between souls." "You possessed your own healer," Alaric concluded, used his knowledge to create the Shadowbane. "And perfected it over decades," the Shadow confirmed. "Soon, an army of vessels awaits me across the border. Victor has seen to that." Alara gasped as understanding dawned. "The Ironhaven soldiers, they've been poisoned with Shadowbane. They're not coming to attack, they're coming to be claimed." "Vessels for an army of shadows," Magnus growled, having shifted partially back to human form to speak. "The war begins again, but not between Ironhaven and Ravenwood, between our world and theirs." The shadow entity laughed. The girl sees clearly now. Too late. With sudden violence, it broke free of Alara's weakening hold, black energy exploding outward. The force knocked all of them backward. Alara struck a stone bench, pain shooting through her shoulder. Through the bond, she felt Magnus's answering pain as he was thrown against a tree. Only Alaric remained standing, a golden shield of alpha energy surrounding him. "You will not leave this courtyard," the king declared. "You can't stop what's already begun," the shadow sneered. The vessels approach. Victor brings them to the ancient stone circle where the veil is thinnest. At midnight, we cross. The stone circle. Alara had heard of it from her mother's stories. A place of power on the border between territories, where centuries ago the first soul healers had performed their rituals. "We have to stop them," she said, struggling to her feet. "If shadows possess those soldiers—" "They'll be unstoppable," Alaric finished grimly. "Neither human nor wolf, but something else entirely." Magnus moved to Alara's side, his hand finding hers. Through their bond, she felt his determination, his readiness to fight despite his injuries. "We need to gather the pack." The shadow entity that was Malcolm smiled, its confidence unnerving. "Gather all you want. The crossing has begun." With those words, its form dissolved into black mist that slipped between the stones of the courtyard floor and vanished. "He's going to the circle," Alaric said. "We must follow." "You're still weak from the poison," Magnus objected. "Father, you should remain here, coordinate the defense of Ravenwood." "This is not a battle that can be won with teeth and claws alone," the king replied. "It will require the power of 3 royal alphas, past, present, and future." His gaze shifted to Alara. "And the last soul healer." "3 royal alphas?" Alara questioned. "You carry my grandchild," Alaric said simply. "I can sense it. The bond has done more than join your souls. It has created new life." Alara's hand moved instinctively to her abdomen. Through the bond, she felt Magnus's shock, then wonder, then fierce protectiveness surge as he processed his father's words. She hadn't known, couldn't have known, but now that Alaric spoke it, she could feel it too, a tiny spark of life, barely formed but already glowing with its own unique energy. "All the more reason you should stay behind," Magnus insisted to his father. "All the more reason I must come," Alaric countered. "This fight is for the future of our bloodline, of both our territories." He straightened, seeming to draw strength from some internal reserve. "Besides, I believe I know how to stop the crossing." As they hurried through the palace gathering allies, Thomas intercepted them in the main hall. His expression was grim as he took in the battle readiness of the group. "Brother," he addressed Magnus, "our scouts report the Ironhaven force has changed course. They're heading for the ancient stone circle." "We know," Magnus replied tersely. "Malcolm has betrayed us. He serves a shadow entity that plans to use those soldiers as vessels." Thomas's face registered shock, then swift calculation. "I've mobilized our border guards, but they won't be enough against 50 possessed men." "We don't fight the men," Alara interjected. "We fight what seeks to possess them." "And how does one fight a shadow?" Thomas asked skeptically. "With light," Alaric said. "Soul healer light. The same power that created the Shadowbane can unmake it." Alara felt the weight of expectation settle on her shoulders. Her power, still new and barely controlled, would be their primary weapon against an ancient evil that had planned this moment for decades. "I'll need to get close to the circle," she said, "close enough to touch it." "Impossible," Thomas scoffed. "Victor's men will cut you down before you get within 100 paces." "Not if they're distracted," Magnus countered, a plan forming in his mind and flowing through the bond to Alara. "Father, can you still call the wild wolves?" Alaric's eyes gleamed with understanding. "The deep call? Yes, though it will drain what strength I have left." "Do it," Magnus urged. "Summon every wolf in the forest to the circle, not to attack, but to surround, to witness. Their presence will disrupt the crossing ritual." "And while Victor's attention is divided," Alara continued, catching Magnus's strategy, "I can reach the center stone, the anchor point. I'll lead a small force to engage their perimeter guards, Thomas added, surprisingly supportive now that a plan was forming. "Create a gap for you to slip through." Alaric nodded approvingly. "It seems my sons can agree after all." The plan set. They moved swiftly. Horses were readied. Alara had never ridden before, but through the bond, Magnus shared his knowledge, guiding her movements. A small force of Ravenwood's elite warriors gathered, Thomas at their head. Alaric, rejecting all suggestions that he rest, mounted a massive black stallion that seemed to share his regal bearing. Before they departed, Alara insisted on checking on Lily. They found the child safe in the inner sanctum, surrounded by other pack children and guarded by Sarah and several fierce she-wolves. "You're leaving," Lily said, as soon as she saw Alara, her young face solemn with understanding beyond her years. "Yes, but I'll return," Alara promised, kneeling to embrace her. "I know you will." Lily pulled back, reaching into her pocket. "Take this, for luck." She pressed a small, smooth stone into Alara's palm, a river pebble painted with a crude silver crescent moon. "I made it for you yesterday. Sarah showed me how." The simple gift brought tears to Alara's eyes. "I'll keep it close to my heart," she vowed, tucking the stone into the inner pocket of her riding tunic. As they rode through the moonlit forest toward the border, Alara marveled at how much had changed in so short a time. 2 days ago, she had been blind, alone, an outcast healer in a village that tolerated her only for her skills. Now she rode beside her alpha mate, carrying their child, her silver eyes piercing the darkness as they raced to confront an ancient enemy. Through the bond, Magnus sent her waves of love and strength. His thoughts touched hers, wordless but clear. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The ancient stone circle appeared before them like a ghostly monument rising from the misty forest floor. 12 massive monoliths, each twice the height of a man, arranged in a perfect circle around a central altar stone. Even from a distance, Alara could see the activity within, torches illuminating dozens of figures, some standing in formation, others moving in what appeared to be a ritualistic pattern. They reined in their horses in a dense copse of trees just beyond view of any sentries. From this vantage point, Alara could make out Victor's distinctive form, resplendent in ceremonial robes, as he directed the proceedings. Beside him stood a figure in shadow that Alara recognized with a chill. Malcolm, or what remained of him, movements jerky and unnatural like a puppet controlled by unseen strings. "The soldiers," Thomas whispered, pointing to the ranks of Ironhaven men standing in perfect, unnatural stillness. "Their eyes, they're all black." Alara focused her enhanced sight and saw he was right. The men's eyes gleamed with the same liquid darkness that had consumed Malcolm. "They've already been prepared with Shadowbane. They're just waiting for the entities to fully cross and claim them." "Then we have little time," Alaric said. He closed his eyes, drawing a deep breath. As he exhaled, a low, resonant howl emerged from his throat. Not loud, but carrying a harmonic that seemed to vibrate through the very earth beneath their feet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from the distant hills, came an answering call. Another joined from the east, then more from the north and west. Within minutes, the forest around them echoed with the voices of wild wolves responding to their ancient king's summons. Inside the circle, the ritual faltered as Victor and the possessed Malcolm looked up in alarm. The shadowy entities hovering above the circle, visible only to Alara's silver sight as wisps of darkness against the night sky, rippled with disturbance. "Now, Thomas," Magnus commanded. Thomas and his warriors moved silently through the trees, splitting into 2 groups to approach the circle from opposite sides. Their attack, when it came, was swift and coordinated. 6 of Victor's perimeter guards fell before they could raise the alarm. The diversion created, Magnus turned to Alara. "Ready?" She nodded, drawing deep within herself to summon her power. Silver light began to glow beneath her skin, illuminating her veins from within. "Be careful," Alaric urged. "The child you carry makes you stronger, but also more vulnerable. The shadows will sense its potential." "I understand," Alara replied. Through the bond, she felt Magnus's concern warring with his pride in her courage. As Thomas's forces engaged the main body of Victor's guards, Magnus and Alara slipped around the edge of the clearing, using the growing chaos as cover. The wild wolves had begun to appear, first one or two, then dozens, materializing from the darkness to form a living barrier around the stone circle. Their presence clearly unnerved the Ironhaven soldiers, whose formation began to falter. "The altar stone," Alara whispered, pointing to the center of the circle. "That's where the veil is thinnest. That's where I need to be." Magnus nodded, shifting partially to access his wolf strength while maintaining human form. Together, they sprinted across the open ground toward the circle's entrance, a gap between two of the towering monoliths. They were halfway there when Victor spotted them. "Stop them!" he shrieked, his composure shattering. "Kill the soul healer!" Several archers turned, bows raised, arrows flew. Magnus pushed Alara behind him, taking a shaft in his shoulder with barely a grunt of pain. Through the bond, Alara felt the impact as if it had struck her own flesh, but there was no time to stop or heal. They pressed forward, Magnus now fully shifted to wolf form, his massive body clearing a path through the disorganized guards. They broke through the perimeter and crossed the threshold into the circle itself. Immediately, Alara felt the difference in the air, heavier, charged with ancient power. The stones hummed with energy that resonated with her own. This place had been built by her kind, by soul healers who understood the boundaries between worlds and how to maintain them. At the center, the possessed Malcolm stood before the altar stone, arms raised, chanting in a language Alara didn't recognize, but somehow understood, the language of shadows, of spaces between souls. "You're too late," Victor called out, moving to intercept them. "The crossing has begun. My new allies will remake this world, with me as their mortal king." "You fool," Alara replied, her voice amplified by the circle's acoustics. "They won't honor any bargain. They'll consume you as they've consumed Malcolm." Victor's face twisted with contempt. "Better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. Your mother understood that before I killed her." The confession sent a shockwave through Alara, both grief and clarity. "You murdered my mother." "On orders from the council, officially," Victor smirked. "But I would have done it for free. She was getting too close to the truth about my Shadowbane experiments, just as you have." Magnus growled, tensing to spring at Victor, but Alara held him back through their bond. Victor wasn't their primary target. The altar stone was. As if sensing her intention, the possessed Malcolm turned from his ritual. "Kill her," he commanded the black-eyed soldiers. "Kill the soul healer and her wolf." The soldiers moved with unnerving synchronicity, weapons raised. But before they could advance, a new howl split the night. Alaric riding into the circle on his black stallion, golden alpha energy blazing around him like a corona. "Now, Alara," he shouted, "while I hold them back." Drawing on her deepest reserves, Alara summoned her power. Silver light erupted from her hands, forming a path through the soldiers toward the altar stone. She ran, Magnus at her side, following the illuminated way. The possessed Malcolm shrieked in fury, black tendrils of shadow energy lashing out to intercept them. Magnus met the attack head-on, his golden alpha power clashing with the darkness in a spectacular collision of energies. Alara reached the altar stone, placing her hands on its cool surface. Instantly, ancient knowledge flooded her mind. The stone's purpose, its power, the ritual of sealing that had been performed centuries ago to close the gateway between worlds, the ritual that was now being reversed. "Magnus," she called out, "I need your blood and mine, royal alpha and soul healer, just as it was when the stones were raised." Understanding flowed through their bond. Magnus shifted partially back to human form, using a claw to slice his palm. He pressed the bleeding wound to the stone beside Alara's hand. She did the same, wincing as she drew her own blood with the edge of Lily's painted stone. As their blood mingled on the ancient surface, Alara began to chant, words she had never learned but somehow knew, flowing from some ancestral memory awakened by the stone's touch. The altar began to glow, first with a faint silver light that matched Alara's own, then brighter, spreading to the surrounding monoliths. The entire circle illuminated from within, revealing runes and symbols carved into the stones that had been invisible before. "No!" The possessed Malcolm's anguished cry echoed through the circle. "The gateway must open! The crossing must continue!" But the ancient magic had been awakened. The light from the stones intensified, forming a dome of energy over the entire circle. Where this dome touched the hovering shadow entities, they shrieked and dissolved like mist before the sun. Victor stared in horror as his plans unraveled. "This isn't possible," he gasped. "The ritual was perfect, the vessels prepared." "You never understood the true purpose of this place," Elara told him, her voice carrying the weight of the knowledge flowing through her from the stones. "It wasn't built to open a way between worlds, but to seal it, to prevent exactly what you've tried to accomplish." The possessed Malcolm made one last desperate lunge toward the altar stone, but Alaric intercepted him, golden alpha energy meeting shadow, in a collision that sent both flying backward. The king landed hard, his aged body crumpling against one of the monoliths. "Father!" Magnus cried out, rushing to Alaric's side. Through their bond, Elara felt Magnus's fear as he cradled his father's broken form. But she couldn't leave the altar stone, not yet. The ritual wasn't complete. The light from the stones pulsed in rhythm with Elara's heartbeat and with the tiny heartbeat of the child within her. 3 generations of power flowing through the circle, repairing the ancient seal. One by one, the shadow entities above were drawn into the light and unmade. The black eyes of the Ironhaven soldiers cleared, leaving confused and frightened men who collapsed where they stood, the Shadowbane poison purged from their systems. Only Victor and the possessed Malcolm remained defiant, standing back to back in the center of the circle as the light closed in around them. "This isn't over," Victor snarled. "There are other circles, other gateways." "Not for you," Elara said with certainty. The stones responded to her will, focusing their light into a beam that struck Victor squarely in the chest. He screamed as decades of Shadowbane exposure were drawn from his body, black ichor pouring from his eyes, nose, and mouth to be consumed by the purifying light. The possessed Malcolm suffered a different fate. As the circle's power reached its peak, the shadow entity was forcibly expelled from its host. Malcolm's true form, old, frail, and long tormented, collapsed to the ground, while the shadow that had worn him writhed in agony, caught in the beam of light from the altar stone. "You cannot destroy me," it hissed in its doubled voice. "I am eternal. I am the space between souls." "Perhaps," Elara acknowledged, "but you will not cross into this world again." With a final surge of power, she completed the ancient ritual. The shadow entity compressed into a tiny point of darkness, then vanished with a sound like the snapping of 1,000 strings. The monoliths flared brilliantly one last time, then settled into a soft, steady glow that Elara sensed would continue for centuries, maintaining the seal between worlds. The battle was over, the crossing prevented, but at what cost? Elara ran to where Magnus knelt beside his father. Alaric's breathing was shallow, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Through the bond, she felt Magnus's grief and desperate hope. "Can you heal him?" he asked as she knelt beside them. Elara placed her hands gently on the king's chest, extending her senses into his body. The damage was extensive: broken bones, internal bleeding, and worst of all, the residual Shadowbane poison that had been slowly killing him for months. "I can try," she whispered, "but he's very weak." Alaric's eyes fluttered open, finding first his son's face, then Elara's. "No," he said, his voice barely audible. "My time has come. I have seen my son find his true mate. I have felt the presence of my grandchild. That is enough." "Father, please," Magnus begged. "Let her try." Alaric's hand found Magnus's, squeezing with surprising strength. "The kingdom needs you now, both of you." His gaze moved to Elara. "Promise me you will rebuild what was broken. Ironhaven and Ravenwood, united as they were always meant to be." Elara nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise." A smile touched the old king's lips. "Helena would be proud of you," he whispered. Then with a final peaceful exhale, King Alaric of Ravenwood closed his eyes. The bond between Alara and Magnus throbbed with shared grief. Around them, the wild wolves raised their voices in a mournful chorus, acknowledging the passing of the Alpha King. Thomas arrived, his battle won, only to fall to his knees beside his father's body. For a moment, the three of them, Magnus, Alara, and Thomas, formed a tableau of sorrow illuminated by the soft glow of the ancient stones. Then, slowly, Magnus rose to his feet, his expression transforming as he embraced his new role. "The king is dead," Thomas announced formally, his voice carrying to all who had gathered. "Long live the king." The wolves, both wild and pack, took up the call, their howls changing from mourning to affirmation. Alara stood beside her mate, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon them both. Through the bond, she sent him her strength, her love, her unwavering support. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Magnus addressed the assembled warriors and witnesses. "Today we have faced darkness and emerged victorious, but our work is not finished. The shadows may be banished, but their legacy remains in the division between our territories." He reached for Alara's hand, drawing her forward. "My mate, Alara of Ironhaven, now of Ravenwood, has shown us that our strength lies in unity, not division. Together, we will rebuild what war and fear have torn apart." Thomas stepped forward, surprising everyone by kneeling before his brother. "My king," he said formally, "my sword and my life are yours to command." The gesture, witnessed by all, healed a rift that had threatened the stability of Ravenwood for years. Magnus helped his brother to his feet, embracing him as an equal. "We carry our father home," Magnus announced, "and then we begin anew." As they prepared to leave the stone circle, Alara felt a presence behind her. Turning, she saw not a physical form, but an impression, the faintest outline of a woman with familiar features. "Mother," she thought, reaching out with her senses rather than her hand. The presence seemed to smile, then fade into the growing light of morning. Whether vision or memory or something else entirely, Alara couldn't say. But she felt a sense of closure, of completeness, as if a circle begun long ago had finally been completed. Magnus's arm slipped around her waist, his warmth anchoring her in the present moment. "What do you see?" he asked softly. "The future," Alara replied, leaning into his embrace. "Our future." Together, they left the ancient stone circle, heading toward Ravenwood and the new day dawning before them. 6 months had passed since the Battle of the Stone Circle, as the people of both territories now called it. 6 months of healing, rebuilding, and cautious diplomacy between Ravenwood and Ironhaven. 6 months of Magnus growing into his role as king, with Alara at his side as his queen. The autumn sun bathed the royal bedchamber in golden light as Alara stood by the window, one hand resting on her rounded abdomen where their child grew stronger each day. Through the bond, she could feel the baby's developing consciousness, a curious, bright presence that already responded to both parents' emotions. "Still restless this morning?" Magnus asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her, his large hands covering hers protectively over their unborn child. "He takes after his father," Alara replied with a smile, leaning back against her mate's solid chest. "Always alert, always watching." "He?" Magnus raised an eyebrow. "You've seen something I haven't?" "Just a feeling." Alara turned in his embrace to face him. "A mother's intuition, perhaps." The bond between them had deepened over the months, allowing them to share not just emotions and surface thoughts, but deeper impressions and sometimes even dreams. It was a level of connection neither had imagined possible, a true merging of souls that made them stronger together than they could ever be apart. A soft knock at the door interrupted their moment of peace. Sarah entered, her face serious but composed. "Your Majesties, the Ironhaven delegation has arrived. They await you in the Great Hall." Magnus nodded, his expression shifting to the carefully controlled mask of kingship he had perfected in recent months. "Thank you, Sarah. Is Lily with them?" "Yes, Your Majesty. She seems well. Excited to see you both." Ilara's heart lightened at the news. Lily had volunteered to spend the last month in Ironhaven as a gesture of goodwill, the first child exchange in what they hoped would become a regular tradition between the territories. It had been Lily's idea, brave beyond her years, to build trust by having children from each territory live and learn in the other. "Tell them we'll be there shortly," Ilara said, already moving to her dressing chamber where a formal gown awaited. Today's meeting would finalize the peace accord between Ravenwood and Ironhaven, ending decades of hostility and establishing a new era of cooperation. As she dressed, Ilara caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror, something that still occasionally startled her after a lifetime of blindness. The woman who looked back at her bore little resemblance to the humble healer she had once been. Queen Ilara of Ravenwood wore her silver eyes and the claiming mark on her neck with pride, her gown of midnight blue embroidered with silver moons, accentuating both her royal status and her growing belly. "Nervous?" Magnus asked as they walked together through the palace corridors. "A little," she admitted. "This is what we've worked toward for months, but old wounds heal slowly. Especially those inflicted over generations," Magnus agreed. "But if anyone can bridge that divide, it's you, my love." The Great Hall had been transformed for the occasion. The throne dais now held 2 equal seats, rather than the single imposing chair of Alaric's time, a physical representation of the partnership between Magnus and Ilara. Representatives from both territories lined the hall, their once distinct styles of dress now beginning to blend as trade and interaction increased. At the head of the Ironhaven delegation stood Thaddeus Morrison, the former chief magistrate who had been appointed interim governor after the exposure of Victor's crimes had thrown their council into chaos. Beside him stood Samuel, who had surprised everyone by becoming an advocate for peace once freed from Victor's influence. But it was the small figure bouncing on her toes between them that caught Ilara's attention. Lily, dressed in a formal Ironhaven tunic, but with Ravenwood braids in her hair, beamed at the sight of Ilara and Magnus. Protocol momentarily forgotten, Lily broke from the delegation and ran forward. "Ilara, Magnus, I missed you so much." Ilara knelt as best she could with her pregnant belly, embracing the child tightly. "We missed you too, little one." Magnus ruffled Lily's hair affectionately before straightening to address their guests. "Welcome to Ravenwood," he said formally. "We are honored by your presence and committed to the peace we gather to affirm today." Morrison stepped forward, bowing with surprising grace for a man of his years. "The honor is ours, King Magnus. Ironhaven comes with open hearts and hands, seeking to heal wounds both old and new." The formal greetings continued as each delegate was introduced. Ilara noted with approval that several of Ironhaven's representatives were individuals who had shown healing potential, people who might, with proper training, develop abilities similar to her own. It had been part of their agreement. Ravenwood would share its knowledge of shape-shifting and pack bonds, while Ilara would teach those with the gift how to safely access and control their healing powers. As the ceremonial introductions concluded, Ilara felt a familiar presence enter her awareness. Thomas had arrived, leading a group of young wolves who had been selected as the first exchange students to live in Ironhaven. Among them was Sarah's granddaughter, a spirited 12-year-old who had formed an immediate bond with Lily during her first stay at the palace. "Shall we proceed to the treaty room?" Magnus suggested. "The documents await our final review and signatures." As the procession moved through the palace, Lily fell into step beside Ilara, her small hand slipping naturally into the Queen's. "Ironhaven is changing," she whispered. "They've opened a school for healers. Samuel says anyone with the gift should be trained, not feared." "That's wonderful news," Ilara replied, squeezing her hand. "And how were you treated? Honestly now." Lily's expression grew thoughtful. "Mostly good. Some of the older people still look at me funny because I live with wolves. But the children were nice once they got to know me. I taught them games from here, and they taught me their songs." Through the bond, Magnus caught the exchange, his satisfaction warming Ilara's heart. This was exactly what they had hoped for. the children leading the way toward true integration. The treaty room was smaller than the Great Hall, designed for intimate discussions rather than grand ceremonies. A circular table dominated the space, another deliberate choice to emphasize equality between the territories. The peace document lay at its center, beautifully inscribed on specially prepared parchment. "Before we sign," Morrison said as they gathered around the table, "there is a matter we would like to address." He nodded to Samuel, who stepped forward holding a small wooden box. "Queen Alara," Samuel began, his voice steady but respectful, "Ironhaven owes you a debt that can never truly be repaid. Your mother, Helena, was wrongfully executed under our laws. Today, we offer not just apology, but restitution." He opened the box, revealing a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon, identical to the symbol Ilara's mother had always worn, the one that had been stripped from her at her execution. "This belonged to your mother," Samuel continued. "It was preserved in the council archives as evidence of her crimes. We return it now to its rightful owner, with our profound regret for the injustice done to her and to you." Ilara's hand trembled as she reached for the pendant. The moment her fingers touched the cool metal, a flood of memories washed over her, not her own, but her mother's, somehow preserved in the silver itself. Helena laughing in a sunlit meadow, young and carefree. Helena holding infant Ilara, singing softly. Helena standing proudly beside a much younger Alaric, their hands clasped in friendship, or perhaps something more. And lastly, Helena's final moments. Her thoughts focused not on her own fate, but on her daughter's safety. Her desperate hope that Ilara would one day find her way to Ravenwood, to the protection of Alaric's line. Tears flowed freely down Ilara's cheeks as she clutched the pendant. "Thank you," she whispered to Samuel. "This means more than you can know." Magnus's arm came around her shoulders, supporting her both physically and emotionally. Through their bond, he shared her grief and healing, honoring Helena's memory alongside her. The moment crystallized something that had been forming in Ilara's mind for months. "Before we sign the treaty," she said, her voice growing stronger, "I would like to propose an addition." Morrison raised his eyebrows, but nodded for her to continue. "In honor of those who died because of fear and misunderstanding, my mother included, I propose we establish a joint memorial at the Stone Circle," Ilara said, "not just to remember the victims, but to transform that place of ancient power into a center for healing and learning, a school where children from both territories can develop their gifts safely, whether those gifts be shape-shifting or soul healing or anything in between." A murmur of surprise and consideration ran through the assembled delegates. "The Stone Circle has always been neutral ground," Magnus added, catching Ilara's vision and expanding upon it. "Neither fully Ravenwood nor fully Ironhaven. What better place to build our shared future?" Morrison stroked his beard thoughtfully. "An ambitious proposal, Your Majesties. The Circle has a complicated history. Many in Ironhaven still fear it after what happened with Victor." "Fear thrives in ignorance," Ilara countered gently. "By bringing light and knowledge to the Circle, we transform it from a place of darkness into one of hope." Samuel stepped forward. "I support the Queen's proposal. I have seen firsthand what happens when gifts are suppressed rather than nurtured. If I had recognized my own daughter's healing abilities instead of fearing them, she might still be alive today." This revelation sent a ripple of surprise through the room. Samuel had never before spoken publicly of his personal connection to the persecution of healers in Ironhaven. "Your daughter was a healer?" Ilara asked softly. "She showed signs when she was barely 7, Samuel confirmed, his voice thick with old grief. "I was a young guard then, eager to prove my loyalty to Ironhaven's laws. I reported her to the council myself, believing I was doing the right thing. They took her away for treatment. She never returned." The room fell silent as the weight of his confession settled over them. Here was the human cost of fear and ignorance, laid bare for all to see. "The memorial will honor her too," Ilara promised. "All of them." Morrison looked around the table, reading the room. "I believe we have consensus to include this proposal in our treaty. The Stone Circle will become a place of healing and learning, jointly administered by both territories. The formal signing that followed felt like more than a political agreement. It was a pledge to a new way of living, a commitment to heal wounds centuries in the making. As Magnus and Alara added their signatures beside Morrison's and Samuel's, Alara felt something shift in the energy between the territories, a knot of old hatred beginning to unravel. The celebrations that followed lasted well into the evening. A feast had been prepared that honored traditions from both territories, with tables arranged so that guests from Ironhaven and Ravenwood sat intermingled rather than separated. Music filled the air, the haunting wolf songs of Ravenwood harmonizing with the complex string melodies of Ironhaven in a surprisingly beautiful blend. Alara moved among the guests, her silver eyes and pregnant form drawing respectful nods and curious glances. Many from Ironhaven had never seen a soul healer in her full power before, just as many from Ravenwood had never interacted with humans who couldn't shift. The atmosphere crackled with curiosity and cautious optimism. "You've achieved more in 6 months than diplomats managed in 30 years, a voice observed from behind her. Alara turned to find Thomas, a goblet of wine in his hand and a thoughtful expression on his face. Their relationship had evolved from suspicion to grudging respect over the months, as Thomas came to recognize her genuine commitment to Ravenwood's welfare. "I had help," Alara replied modestly, nodding toward Magnus, who was deep in conversation with Morrison across the room. "My brother has always been a capable warrior," Thomas acknowledged. "But peace? That's your influence." He studied her face. "You know, when you first arrived, I was certain you would destroy everything our father built. And now? Now I think you're building something better." Thomas raised his goblet in a small salute. "To the future of Ravenwood and Ironhaven, united and stronger." As Thomas moved away, Alara felt a tug on her skirt. Lily stood there, her eyes bright with excitement. "Come see!" she urged, pulling Alara toward the center of the hall where a space had been cleared. A group of children, a mix from both territories, had formed a circle. In the center stood Sarah's granddaughter, shifted into her wolf cub form, while an Ironhaven boy of about 11 demonstrated a traditional dance around her. The adults watched in amazement as the children effortlessly blended their different traditions into something new and joyful. "We made it up together," Lily explained proudly. "Wolf Dance. It tells the story of the battle at the Stone Circle, how everyone worked together to defeat the shadows." Alara's heart swelled as she watched the performance unfold. This was the true victory, not the treaty or the political alliances, but these children who saw no boundaries between them, who created beauty from their differences. As the evening wound down, Alara found herself drawn to the palace gardens. The full moon hung low in the sky, bathing the carefully tended paths in silver light that reminded her of her own healing energy. She walked slowly, one hand cradling her belly, enjoying a moment of solitude amidst the festivities. "I thought I might find you here," Magnus said, joining her on the stone bench beneath an ancient oak. "The baby getting restless again?" "He's calm now," Alara said, leaning against her mate's shoulder. "I think he approves of today's work." Magnus chuckled, his hand covering hers. "Already a diplomat in the womb. He'll make a fine king someday." The thought brought both pride and a touch of melancholy. Their child would inherit a world very different from the one they had grown up in, hopefully better, more united, but undoubtedly still complex. "I've been thinking about names," Alara said. "What do you think of Alaric, after your father?" Magnus was quiet for a moment, considering. "A strong name with a proud history," he finally said. "But perhaps our son deserves his own legacy, unburdened by the past." "What did you have in mind?" "Ethan," Magnus suggested. "It means strong in the old tongue, but also enduring peace. A name that honors what we've built together." Alara closed her eyes, testing the name in her mind. "Ethan," she repeated softly. "I like it." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of running footsteps. Sarah appeared on the garden path, her expression urgent. "Your Majesties, you must come quickly. It's the Ironhaven delegate, Samuel." They followed Sarah to the guest chambers where Samuel had been housed. The former commander lay on his bed, his skin ashen, his breathing labored. Morrison stood nearby, face grave with concern. "It came on suddenly," Morrison explained. "One moment he was fine, the next—" Elara moved to Samuel's side, her healer's instincts taking precedence over her royal status. She placed a hand on his forehead, extending her senses into his body. What she found sent a chill through her. "Shadowbane," she whispered, recognizing the familiar corruption spreading through his system. But different, more refined, harder to detect. "Impossible," Morrison objected. "All of Victor's supply was destroyed after his death." "Someone else knows the formula," Magnus said grimly. "Someone continued his work." Samuel's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty on Elara. "Knew. Something was wrong," he gasped. "Began after the last council meeting. Thought it was age." Alara's mind raced. If Samuel had been poisoned at a council meeting, it meant the corruption still ran deep in Ironhaven's government, despite Victor's removal. The peace they had worked so hard to establish was built on unstable ground. "I can help him," she said, already gathering her power. "But we need to know who did this. The treaty, everything we've accomplished, it's all at risk." Through the bond, she felt Magnus's strategic mind engaging with the problem. "Morrison," he addressed the Ironhaven leader directly, "who attended the council meeting where Samuel might have been exposed?" Morrison listed several names, all respected Ironhaven officials who had seemingly supported the peace process. None stood out as obvious suspects. "There's something else," Samuel managed, his voice strengthening slightly as Alara's healing energy began to counteract the poison. "Found records. In Victor's private study. Names, dates. Going back 40 years. "Records of what?" Magnus pressed. "Shadow Society," Samuel replied. "Secret group. Infiltrated both territories. Victor was just one member." The revelation hit like a physical blow. The Shadow Society, a myth, a boogeyman story told to scare children. Yet it made terrible sense. The coordinated efforts to reignite conflict between the territories, the sophisticated development of Shadowbane, the persistence of the plot across decades, it all pointed to an organized group rather than a single madman. "We need those records," Magnus said decisively. "Hidden," Samuel gasped. "Stone circle, beneath the altar." Alara's hands faltered momentarily in their healing work. "Victor hid evidence at the stone circle? Right under our noses?" "Said it was safest place. No one would look. Where battle happened." The irony would have been amusing if the situation weren't so dire. All these months of planning a memorial and school at the stone circle, never realizing the site still held secrets that could unravel everything they had built. "We'll retrieve the records," Magnus promised. "But first, we need to secure both our delegations. If the Shadow Society has infiltrated both territories, anyone could be compromised." Through their bond, Elara felt his rising concern for her and their unborn child. The threat was no longer abstract. It had reached into the very heart of their peace celebration, a stark reminder that old hatreds and ambitions didn't die easily. "I'll continue healing Samuel," Elara decided. "You alert Thomas and organize a party to secure the stone circle before anyone else can reach it." Magnus hesitated, reluctant to leave her side with a potential assassin in their midst. "You should be guarded," he insisted. "I'll stay with her," Morrison volunteered, surprising them both with his directness. "Whatever conspiracy exists, I want no part of it. Ironhaven has seen enough bloodshed and fear." Magnus weighed the offer, then nodded curtly. "Sarah," he called to the waiting attendant, "send Lydia and 2 of her warriors to guard the queen. No one enters without my direct order." As Magnus left to organize the expedition to the stone circle, Elara refocused on healing Samuel. The Shadowbane variant in his system was indeed more sophisticated than what had infected Magnus, designed to work slowly, mimicking natural illness, nearly undetectable except to a soul healer's senses. "Will he recover?" Morrison asked quietly as he watched her work. "Yes, Alara said with confidence. The poison hasn't reached his heart yet, but it was a near thing. A few more days, and not even I could have saved him. Why Samuel? Morrison wondered aloud. Of all the delegates to target. Because he knows something, Alara realized. Something about the Shadow Society that makes him dangerous to them. Something beyond the records he found. Samuel's eyes opened again, clearer now as the healing progressed. My daughter, he whispered. Not dead. Taken. Taken where? Alara asked gently. Don't know, but saw her. Month ago. In Ironhaven Market. Older, but same eyes. Same gift. The pieces began to fall into place in Alara's mind, a pattern spanning decades. Children with the healing gift, disappearing rather than being executed as everyone believed. Victor's obsession with Lily. The Shadow Society's apparent knowledge of soul healing that enabled them to create Shadowbane. They've been collecting healers, she said, horror dawning as the implications became clear. Not killing them, but taking them, using them somehow. Through the bond, she shared her realization with Magnus, feeling his reaction, shock followed by grim determination. His response came swiftly. Be careful. Trust no one completely. I'm sending Thomas back to you. As night deepened outside the palace windows, Alara continued her healing work on Samuel, while her mind raced with questions. The Shadow Society, the stolen healers, the refined Shadowbane, all pieces of a puzzle whose full picture remained frustratingly obscure. One thing was certain. The battle they had fought at the Stone Circle 6 months ago had not been the end of the threat, but merely the first skirmish in a longer war. A war fought not with claws and teeth, but with secrets and shadows, infiltration and subversion. The child within her stirred, responding to her tension. Alara took a deep breath, willing herself to remain calm. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Magnus with his strength and strategy, she with her healing and insight, and soon their son, Ethan, whose very name embodied their hope for the future. Outside, the wolves began to howl, a warning, a rallying cry. Through the bond, Alara felt Magnus's fierce determination as he and his warriors rode for the Stone Circle. Whatever secrets lay hidden beneath the ancient stones, they would uncover them. Whatever threat still lurked in the shadows, they would face it. The moonlight streaming through the window caught on Helena's silver pendant, now hanging around Alara's neck. The crescent gleamed with an almost supernatural brightness, as if responding to her thoughts. For a moment, Alara could have sworn she heard her mother's voice, carried on the night wind. The shadows are not our enemies, Alara. They are souls without anchors, fragments seeking to be whole. The first soul healers didn't mend bodies. They mended the torn places between worlds. Alara touched the pendant, a new understanding dawning. Perhaps the true purpose of the soul healers had never been fully realized, not just to heal individuals, but to heal the very fabric of reality, to mend the tears between worlds that allowed entities like the Shadow General to cross over. The Stone Circle, she murmured, pieces clicking into place. It's not just a gateway. It's a wound in the world that never fully healed. And if that was true, then the Shadow Society's interest in soul healers and the Stone Circle took on a terrifying new dimension. They weren't just seeking to open a door. They were trying to tear down the wall between worlds entirely. Thomas arrived, his expression grave as he took in the scene. My brother has reached the circle, he reported. They've secured the perimeter, but there are signs others were there recently. The search for the records continues. Alara nodded, completing her healing work on Samuel. The commander would recover, though he would need rest. Help me up, she requested, extending her hand to Thomas. There's something I need to check in the library archives. The Queen should rest, Morrison objected. In your condition. In my condition, I am still Queen, Alara replied firmly. And I believe I've just understood something crucial about the Stone Circle and the Shadow Society's true aim. As Thomas helped her to her feet, the baby kicked forcefully, as if in agreement. Alara placed a protective hand over her belly, her determination hardening into resolve. Whatever darkness still threatened from the shadows, she would meet it with light. For Magnus, for their unborn son, for both their peoples who deserved the peace they had only just begun to build. The ancient texts would hold the answers they needed. And with those answers would come the next phase of their journey, not just as rulers of a united territory, but as guardians of the boundary between worlds that the first soul healers had sworn to protect. The war was not over. In many ways, it had only just begun. But as Alara moved through the moonlit corridors of Ravenwood Palace, her silver eyes gleaming with purpose, she knew with bone-deep certainty that they would prevail. For what force in any world could stand against the combined strength of an alpha king, a soul healer queen, and the child of both bloodlines growing stronger each day within her womb? The shadows had no idea what awaited them.